Hey guys, welcome back. And today we are joined with a very special guest. We have Ian Cummings from Pro Football Network today. We're going to do a 2-round post trade deadline mock draft. So I'm really excited about this one. Ian, introduce yourself and kind of plug whatever you want.
Yeah, for sure. Ian Cummings from Pro Football Network, scouting analyst, NFL draft analyst. We are midway through the college football season right now, so NFL draft, we're ramping up toward it. We're almost there. You can follow all of my draft scouting work at IC_draft on Twitter. We got a podcast each week with my good friend Dalton Miller, and we're gonna have content ramping up as the season progresses. But right now, just happy to be here with you doing this mock draft. Every mock draft that I do, it gets lost in the in the weeds sometimes. But the purpose of a mock draft is really to go through different possibilities and explore different probabilities for the NFL draft. So glad we get a chance to do that again here.
Yeah, absolutely. And mock drafts, some of my favorite videos to make. Love doing it with other guests. So really appreciate you coming on. So like I said, it's going to be a 2-round mock. I will have the odd picks. Ian will have the even picks. And we'll just kind of go back and forth. There will be no trades in this one. And we're going to get right into it with the Arizona Cardinals with the number 1 overall pick. And a lot of people want to go quarterback here. And I'm just not buying it. You got Kyler Murray coming back, and I think Kyler Murray has kind of become one of the most underappreciated players in the NFL. I think he is a top 12 quarterback in the league when he's on. People forget they were 9-0 before he got hurt just a few years ago. I don't think they're going to take a quarterback here. Realistically, I do think this would be a trade back spot, but if they're going to stay put, I think they're going to take the best player on this entire draft. To me, that's Marvin Harrison Jr. He is the best wide receiver I think I have ever seen coming out of the collegiate level. And the receiving core, while I loved Michael Wilson coming out of Stanford, Marquise Brown has some question marks there. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. completely changes this entire roster. He's got great size. He's running in the 4.3s apparently, which is absurd for his size. He's the best receiver I've seen, and I think he makes a massive difference to this Arizona team. So he's going to be my number 1 overall pick here.
Yeah, honestly, I think, best player in the draft, that was kind of how it was preseason for me, and nothing has happened to dispute that this year. I mean, he's been incredible. I mean, I think I started my grading scale around the time that Jamar Chase came out. I've definitely refined it since then, but I think that Marvin Harrison Jr., a good bet to be my highest graded wide receiver ever, in contention with Chase. So he's a complete package. It's 6'4", 205, the route flexibility, the hands, the instincts, and rack ability is what he's shown this year too. So everything that you need, and you mentioned the speed as well as a cherry on top, he's got all of that. So big fan of him, obviously number 1 overall player. The Bears are picking a number 2, and it's tough because this is kind of a projective exercise, right? And we do have to work with the draft order that we're given too. Like, in this scenario, the Bears are projected to pick number 2 overall. If that happens, what do we think happens with the Bears franchise? I think Matt Eberflus is probably out the door. You might be looking at a regime change. And in that scenario, maybe Justin Fields is on the move. And in that case, maybe you're looking at a quarterback. So, if all of that happens, if all of those dominoes fall and you're picking number 2 overall, I have to think a quarterback change is in the cards for the Bears. Maybe a team that's looking to contend or, turn the page at quarterback trades for Justin Fields, very high upside passer who I still have faith in. So we'll see what happens there. But we see these changes happen all the time. I think this could happen if this is where they pick. So number 2 overall for the Chicago Bears, I am taking Drake May from North Carolina, my personal QB1. Now it's really QB1A, QB1B. For me, I think him and Caleb Williams is really a coin flip. It's a 50-50 decision. But for me, quarterback play, the important part is it's always a balance of the physical talent and the operational utility within the pocket. And I think if you look at that balance and compare the two, Drake May, to me, has a better balance right now. I think Caleb Williams is definitely the more prolific creator, but Drake May still has very good arm talent, very good off-platform ability and arm elasticity, torquing ability with his hips. And then within the pocket, decisive, accurate. I think he's shown very bright flashes of anticipation, processing, field vision, all the things that I want in my franchise QB. So I would take either one. I think it's a 50-50 call. But for me, Drake May, he was a hair above Williams to enter the year. And so far, nothing has happened for me to quite change that. So Drake May, number 2 to the Chicago Bears. Excited to see what he can do in the NFL.
That one, I would have expected Caleb Williams. I don't hate it. Drake May is closing the gap each and every week. It's getting closer and closer for the two for me. Chicago going back to North Carolina with the number 2 overall pick and taking a quarterback, which is pretty funny. We saw how the Mitch Trubisky thing went.
Yep. And for Bears fans watching this, I do want to just give you some reassurance here. The outing, definitely we can fall into it sometimes, but I think Drake May is comfortably a better prospect than Mitchell Trubisky was. I think you look at the diagnostics on tape. It's a little scary for sure, dipping back into that pool, but I am confident in his abilities. And I think both him and Williams would be phenomenal choices at this point. I think if you're a team picking, top 3, either of those guys, I don't think you can go wrong.
Yeah, I agree there. The Bears back on the clock here at number 3, so they've taken Drake May. And their offensive line still isn't great. I love Darnell Wright, the right tackle from Tennessee. I think that was a good pick. Braxton Jones has shown some flashes, but I don't know if he's your franchise left tackle. They've got Tevin Jenkins. I think they would probably address the interior first and foremost. It's way too high for an interior offensive guy in this class. But I am going to go with the tackle nonetheless. I'm going to go with my number 3 player in the class, and that's going to be Olu Fashanu out of Penn State. This guy is super athletic at the left tackle position. He's got a great frame. The anchor can be a bit of a concern for some people, especially going up against some powerful edge rushers like Rashawn Gary twice a year. But I think he could get that together. He was going to be probably my edge one or my offensive tackle one, last year. I decided to go back to Penn State, and he's only gotten better. So Olu Fashanu is going to be my number 3 overall pick to the Chicago Bears.
Nice. It's really interesting, I think, the tackle conversation for the Bears, because you mentioned they just drafted Darnell Wright. Braxton Jones is a good young player, but this would really improve the depth of the unit. Braxton Jones would be one of the best swing tackles in the NFL right away, I think. And, if you invest in a QB, whether it's May or Williams, you want to make sure he stays upright, has time to throw, is comfortable early on in his career. So no complaints from me getting an offensive tackle. And Olu Fashanu, one of the most complete ones in this class. So big fan of that pick. New York Giants at number 4 here. They're always a tough team to pick for, man, because honestly, you're stuck with Daniel Jones, I feel like. I think at the best case scenario is that he becomes a top 15 quarterback again, right? He hasn't been very good this year when he's healthy, but he hasn't had a ton of help from the offensive line either. Doesn't have very many weapons either. So it's a tough situation. I feel like, on the surface, you're stuck with him. Now, me and Dalton did a podcast recently where we did a first-round mock, and I picked J.J. McCarthy for them just for kicks, right? Just to kind of see if it was possible. You're definitely eating some cap early on in that situation, but long-term, it could be better. Maybe you waste less time, and you're able to move on to a young passer a little bit earlier. That said, right here for the New York Giants, I am not going to go QB. I'm going to go with the scenario. What if they decide to stick with Daniel Jones, give him a chance to rebound next year when they've built up that offensive line and when the young players have developed a little bit more? We'll see. It's a precarious situation all around, but we don't really know what's going to happen. So for the New York Giants with this pick, I'm going to go off the beaten path, not off the beaten path a little bit, but we're going to go, a little interesting here. I'm going to take Keon Coleman, Florida State wide receiver. We're going to go number 4 overall. I think, the wide receiver 2 battle in this class is very close between Keon Coleman, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze is in there. Emeka Egbuka hasn't been healthy this year, but still really liked his tape coming into the year. I think he could be a first-round guy. But Keon Coleman, to me, and he's not my wide receiver too, Malik Neighbors is, but I look at what the New York Giants really need. They need that guy who can be a go-to threat on the boundary. They need a guy who can dominate defensive backs 2 or 3 inches shorter than him at least. Keon Coleman, 6'4", 215. We saw him play the alpha role this past weekend against Kalen Carson, the cornerback prospect that I like a lot. He was dominant at the catch point, and he showed that he had the athletic tools to separate, to generate rack yards. I think you're looking at a complete 3-level threat who's got that alpha mentality on top of that, and that can be a tone setter, a game-changing trait for an offense. So Keon Coleman, that go-to guy with 3-level upside. I think top 5 is definitely in the equation for him. If not top 10, top half of round 1. I think that's ultimately what his floor is.
Yeah, I like the pick, but Caleb Williams is still on the board, and here at number 5,
I know.
There's no way the Patriots are passing on Caleb Williams here at 5. No chance. I know Caleb Williams has had a rough few weeks. The Cow game wasn't pretty, even though they were able to pull out the win. But Caleb Williams is still a very good quarterback prospect. And my number 2 overall player, he's got a great arm. His escapability is incredible. His ability to extend plays with his legs. I like all that. Now, he does hold on to the ball way too long for my liking. He needs to throw the ball away and read a defense a little bit better, take what the defense has given him, check the ball down. but Caleb Williams athletically is an upgrade over Daniel Jones. And if he falls to 5, I think if he falls to 3, I think a lot of teams are trading up. Obviously, no trades in this, but the Patriots get him at 5, which is probably the lowest I've seen him in any mock draft yet. So I'm prepared for some wild comments on this one, but I don't hate it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of those things where, in another situation, I'd probably pick Caleb Williams for the Giants. It's one of those things where, especially with the timeline that they've kind of got themselves stuck with Daniel Jones, you don't know what they're going to do. They've already kind of, presented that marriage. So we'll see if they stick with it or if they pivot because things aren't going according to plan. I don't know what's going to happen, but you're right. If we did have trades, teams would obviously be hitting the phone lines and trading up to that number 3 spot. That would be the hot spot. For that team, for the Bears, I think having that second pick, they'd be able to trade back, get some more capital for Drake May. So that'd be phenomenal. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with Williams, really in structure, still passing up open targets in the short range, sometimes trying to look for the big play, waiting a little too long, creating some of the chaos that he's so good at navigating through. I will say the Lincoln Riley offense is pretty vertically oriented, so there aren't a ton of checkdowns and off outlets schemed into it, which can hurt Williams at times too. So I don't think it's all on him. And I think the hyper elite creation capacity shows up within that lens. So, either way, top 5 talent, arguable QB1. I think it's between him and May, and either one would be a great decision. But Green Bay Packers, number 6. I'm going to make this quick because I can already feel myself getting long-winded, and this one is easy. You need an offensive tackle. Jordan Love hasn't completely proven himself as the guy, but I also don't think he's had the proper support so far. I think getting Joe Alt from Notre Dame would be my optimal pick. 6'8", 315, super athletic, super flexible. And I think some of the issues that I had with him coming into the year, more consistent hand usage, stronger at the point of attack. I think he's shown all of that in the hyper elite recovery capacity for an offensive tackle. One of the most important traits that you can have. So he's actually a leapfrog Fashan, who is my personal OT1, both phenomenal players, but Joe Alt to me is really taking a leap this year. He's been phenomenal.
Yeah, that would have been my pick as well. Joe Alt's incredible, especially with the David Bakhtiari potentially getting traded. I think they're going to need to address that tackle position. And I think it's a deeper quarterback class. If they want to find a replacement, you could probably find him in round 2. I like that move a lot. Now for my team, the Indianapolis Colts. Again, I'm going to make this quick. The secondary is absolutely atrocious. I know a lot of people are going to talk wide receiver. And there's a bunch of good wide receivers on the board, but I think Kool-Aid McKinstry is the easy pick here. They need a corner. You saw what happened when Juju Brents went down. This cornerback room is one of the weakest in the league. They didn't make a trade for a corner. I think Kool-Aid McKinstry, he's got great size, long arms, solid speed, and he's really good in man coverage. I think he would be excellent for the Colts, a team that's in desperate need of some secondary help. So he's going to be my pick here at 7.
I love that corner duo, Juju Brents and Kool-Aid McKinstry. First off, the names alone, top tier, A+. But then at the same time, you got length, athleticism, ball skills, physicality, really just everything you need. 2 young guys who are on the ascent. So I like that a lot. Las Vegas Raiders at number 8. I'm going to go quarterback. I'm going to go J.J. McCarthy. I think if the Raiders are picking this high, to me, it feels like the writing is already on the wall with Josh McDaniels. I think he's losing that locker room, and we've seen that happen before. A long time ago in Denver, kind of the same thing happened. Jimmy Garoppolo is under contract for 3 years, but already one of the most turnover-prone QBs in the NFL this year, and durability has been a major concern. That signing is not aging well at all. I think his deal is definitely a little more malleable past the 1 to 2 year window than, say, Daniel Jones, like we were just talking about. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is more apt to be a bridge quarterback right now, and J.J. McCarthy, I think, is the perfect QB to bring into that situation. A young QB who is on the upward trajectory this year. He's been phenomenal this year. I use that word a lot, but there's so many high-performing NFL draft prospects, and McCarthy's at the top of the list. Around 6'3", phenomenal athlete in the pocket, really good evasive ability, really good pocket management skills. But this year, beyond the high-level creation ability, the high-level arm talent, he's shown discipline in the pocket. He's shown really great anticipation over the middle of the field, leverage awareness, football IQ, maturation as a passer that we didn't see in his first 2 years. So I think McCarthy is really checking all the boxes. He's my QB3 past the top 2 guys. And I think a young QB with all of that physical talent, really worth investing in. With Garoppolo on deck, you don't have to start him right away. But in the long term, I think he can be that guy for you. So QB with franchise level upside, JJ McCarthy, I think that's the move you make if you're the Raiders.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. I think quarterback, especially after the Monday night game last night, it's becoming more and more apparent they need to address the quarterback position. We got the Denver Broncos here at number 9. Denver's weird because I'm not totally ready to write them off yet because their defense has looked incredible the last few weeks. Their offense, Russell Wilson is playing pretty well for this team. So I'm not really sure where to go with this team. I think I'm just going to go with best player available here because I do think defense is still a need. And it comes down to me between Dallas Turner and Jared Verse. You could go either way. Jared Verse has been still pretty good this year. I think Dallas Turner fits this scheme for Denver a little bit better. So I actually am going to go with Dallas Turner here. Jared Verse is my number one edge rusher, but I think Dallas Turner kind of fits what the Broncos want to do defensively a little bit better. So I'm going to go with Dallas Turner here to the Broncos at 9.
Nice. Yeah, Dallas Turner is always one of my favorite edges to watch in this class just because of the tools, man. I mean, a guy 6'4" with, 34, 35-inch arms should not be as explosive, as bendy as he is. So you're working with a full palette of athletic upside there. It's really fun to watch.
Yeah.
The Los Angeles Rams at number 10, man. This is a tough one. I gotta look at the board real quick. I gotta decompress because I'm not sure if there's value at some of the positions of need that I've been accustomed to seeing here. I'm gonna go with like Chop Robinson, edge, kind of stands out to me as a potential fit. I know Byron Young is a really good young pass rusher, but I think he's more of a third guy. I don't think he should be your premier guy at the next level. So getting a guy, in that rotation above him would be good. But I'm going to go a little bit off the wall here. I'm going to go with Brock Bowers. I think for this offense, I know they have Tyler Higbee. They just re-signed him to a deal, but Brock Bowers is more of that hybrid wide receiver tight end, that big slot. You can move him around everywhere. You can use him as a blocker, but really, I think one of the biggest strengths of Sean McVay as an offensive play caller, and we saw it with Puka Nacua. One reason Nacua was able to be productive so early in his career is because he's so good at scheming his playmakers open, giving them opportunities. And I think a weapon like Brock Bowers with this kind of offense, with this kind of talent around him, and Matthew Stafford who can give them those one-on-one opportunities, the sky's the limit. I think at this point, you have a good trio up front with your receiver core. Cooper Kupp, Nacua, and Tutu Atwell has been a great speed threat, but you don't have a complete walking mismatch like Brock Bowers in your room. I think this is the guy who blends the boundary between wide receiver and tight end and just becomes that all-encompassing positionless weapon for this team. So I think number 10, the value, the need isn't quite there in this aspect, but the value I think is the greatest, and especially with the personnel they got, this can be an explosive combination.
Yeah, I love Brock Bowers. He's an incredible, incredible prospect. Haven't really messed with the idea of him to the Rams, but I kind of like that. That would just be really hard for
Sean McVay with Bowers, man. It's just, oh god, it feels unfair almost to even think about it.
Yeah, for sure. We got the Washington Commanders, who this has been a tackle for me over and over, and I'm still considering tackle, but after they moved both Montez Sweat and Chase Young at the deadline, edge is a very big need for them. KJ Henry is probably their number one edge rusher right now. Don't really love that if I'm the Commanders. So I'm going to go with Jared Verse. I think he fits the scheme and a 4-3 edge really well. He's explosive. He's got some really good pass rush moves. Maybe not the greatest run defender, but you've got the interior defensive line to stop the run. I think Jared Verse is an excellent player. He is my number one edge rusher in this class. I think he fits Washington really, really well.
Yeah, I like that one too. I think Jared Verse, to start the year, he wasn't quite as productive, but he's started to pick up on that now. I think, one of the knocks you could put on him is that he doesn't have elite bend. I think the hip flexibility, we see it at the apex. He'll get locked out sometimes. But if you're playing him as a 4-3 defensive end with his hand in the dirt, some of the things that he does best, explode off the line, use his twitch to offset tackles and launch forward with that power element. He's got that to a high degree, and I think he's a very good technician with his hands too, very good run defender. So I think a really safe pick here with some upside if he can keep refining his counters past initial contact. So I like that for sure. Who is next? We got the Cardinals, right? Cardinals at number 12. This is a tough one. We picked Marvin Harrison Jr. up front. We know they're not going QB because they passed in the top ones. So I'm looking at a few positions come to mind for me. I think it's a little too early for the corners that are left on the board right now. I know Chop Robinson could be an option here. You could go with an offensive tackle because I know DJ Humphries is not long for Arizona. I'm thinking this out in my head here. The Arizona Cardinals, man, it's always fun to mock for them with this second pick because there's so many different ways that they could go. But for me right now, I think I'm going to get that disruptor on the defensive line who can be alignment flexible, who can be really valuable for your entire scheme with the way he's just consistently able to disrupt. And that is Jerzon Newton from Illinois. I look at the way that he plays, 6'2", 290, a bit of a size outlier because the length is not a strength for him, but just looking at the way he plays the game, I mean, first of all, explosive, right? I mean, that is not an issue with him, but then the flexibility is insane. I mean, this is a guy who will stunt from 3-tech to outside the tackle and still get pressure because he's able to sink underneath the tackle and multitask with his hands while doing so, sustain his acceleration. I mean, that is a freakish part of his game, the flexibility. And then on top of that, very sound run defender, very good at winning with quick swims and swipes. He's got that entire arsenal in his bag. So I think, you need a good nose tackle, right? I would want to pair him with a nose tackle who can encumber blocks and isolate him with one-on-one matchups. But if you can do that, Jerzon Newton can be a game changer for your defensive line. So I'm upgrading the trenches on the other side. Jerzon Newton is my pick.
I love that pick. That's like one of my favorite picks to make for the Arizona Cardinals. Jerzon Newton is an absolute monster. And I love that for Jonathan Gannon's defense as well. We got the Bucs here. The Bucs are one of the hardest teams for me to mock for because they're complete in a lot of areas, but you have some aging players. I'm looking at the edge potentially. We got Latu. We've got Chop Robinson. I think Latu's a better fit for Tampa Bay's defense. You could look quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, both still on the board. Could go look at that right tackle spot even. You got Talise Fuaga. You've got Amarius Mims. I'm going to go with the safest pick here. I'm going to take Latu out of UCLA. Shaq Barrett, Joe Tryon-Shivnika is not been the player that they thought. I think Latu is explosive. There's going to be some health concerns there because of the neck that he suffered at Washington, but he's been absolutely incredible for UCLA this year, and I think he is going to be a really good fit for this team. So I'm going to take Latu to the Bucs.
Nice. Yeah, I think the pass rushing element is really, and I think, perfect scheme fit, like you said, carries his weight really well. A pass rushing technician who can stack counters. I think the neck injury will be concerned. The run defense utility for me is not quite there as much as it is with other prospects. But again, he's got enough burst off the line, the size, the length, the hand usage, and then the flexibility too. I mean, that kind of gets underrated with his game. He's not that ultra bendy guy like a Von Miller type, but he does have enough ankle flexion to reduce his surface area and force tackles to lean a bit while he's combating their hands. So it's kind of an underrated thing that falls under the radar, but definitely for his size, it shows up. It's a very good strength to have. So I like that pick for sure. Los Angeles Chargers at number 14 overall. There's a few positions here that I'm considering. Malik Neighbors is still on the board, man, and I love Malik Neighbors. He's a top 10 prospect for me. I know they just drafted Quentin Johnson. He had a good night last night, but or Sunday night. It was Sunday night. But Neighbors to me is just out of this world. So I'm considering that. But then at the same time, cornerback is a massive need for Los Angeles. I mean, you're looking at, almost no long-term building blocks in the building right now. So corner is kind of what I'm leaning towards. I think you can get a good wide receiver in round 2 or round 3. I'm going to go with Nate Wiggins from Clemson. I think he's a really good fit for the scheme. 6'2", a little bit leaner, right? But I think, very free-flowing athlete for his size. I think he's got the explosiveness, the twitch, the agility, the fluidity, the long speed that you're looking for, and then the route identification ability, the quick reaction and zone, the chippiness and man to not give an inch and, stay on his man, stay in the hip pocket, and then the ball skills, very good timing, very good coordination. I think he's really one of the more complete corners past Kool-Aid McKinstry in this class, and especially in this scheme where you can let him roam and zone or man up guys. I think he can do either one.
Yeah, I think secondary is their biggest need. I like Cooper DeJean here as well. I think just his versatility would be massive for this team. But I like Nate Wiggins quite a bit. We got the Titans here, and it's between 3 positions. It's corner, tackle, or receiver. I don't know what's going to happen with DeAndre Hopkins long-term. Didn't get traded, but I'm not really sure there. It's a deep receiver class, so I feel like I could pass on receiver now and get a receiver later. Amarius Mims is still on the board. I know he's dealing with injuries, but he was incredible to start this season. And even at the end of last year in the college football playoff, his versatility, he could play on the left side, could play on the right side, great size, good power. I think Amarius Mims is going to be my pick here because the offensive line still a major concern to me when it comes to the Tennessee Titans. You drafted Peter Skoronski last year. You've got Nicholas Petit-Frere in there. This offensive line is not a strength of the Tennessee Titans. I think you need to continuously add pieces to that line, and I think Amarius Mims, he's a top 10 guy for me, and I'm going to take him here to the Titans.
The thing that stuck out with Amarius Mims to me, I know we didn't get to see him play a lot this year because unfortunately he got injured, but the dude's just an out of this world talent. I mean, 6'7", 330 is what he's listed at, and he looks like a move tight end out there. I mean, he moves so effortlessly. So I think, if we compared him at week 1 through week 3 of this year to Broderick Jones from last year,
yeah,
I think Mims was a little bit better at leveraging his frame, right? Getting that knee bend in there, proper pad level, even at his size. So, I think you're already working at a guy who's just very natural in every phase of the game. And on top of that, really good moving blocker. So, I know that, his name has kind of fallen under the radar because he hasn't been on the field. But for me, again, a top 25 talent. And I think if you project for the athletic upside, definitely worth taking this high. So the Titans, look at that left side, Amarius Mims, Peter Skoronski, or you can move in the right side too. I think that's a really good pick to make. So I like that for sure. Who we got now? We got the
Saints.
The Saints. Oh man, they're always a tough team to pick for, man, because some of their top needs like safety, this might be a little high for a safety. You could go Cameron Kinchins. I like Andrew Makuba from Clemson as well. I think I'm going to pass on safety. I think I'm going to look at, there's a few positions here. I know offensive tackle Trevor Penning hasn't quite panned out the way we thought he would. Are we gonna re-up with that this early? I'm not so sure about that. There are a few good tackles on the board. We could do it if we wanted to. I like Talise Fuaga for sure. And Ryan Ramczyk is getting older. I think they have him under contract long enough, though, so he's not a concern right now. Fuaga, though, is a natural right tackle. So,
yeah,
you wonder if he can move to the left side. I think he's coordinated enough that he could. But shoot, man, I know we talked about it before the podcast, but I was looking at some defensive tackles. I'm going to go off the wall here. I'm going to go with Tyleik Williams from Ohio State. I think he's been incredibly productive this year. I think the Saints need some more talent on that interior defensive line. They have good rotational guys, but I don't know if they have a top-end guy like Tyleik Williams, who is as versatile as he is. And Tyleik Williams, to me, 6'3". He's been as heavy as 360 in his career. He's down to 320 now, and you watch him move at that size. The dude just explodes off the line. I mean, it's effortless for him. He gets instant momentum, very, very versatile, very flexible for his size. He can stunt outside to 5-tech even and use active hands within that phase. We saw him slabbing Joe Alt in run defense against Notre Dame. To me, I think Tyleik Williams, is kind of that unlocking piece for this defensive line. If you want to do an odd front, you can put him at 0-tech and 1-tech and let him encumber blocks. You can do an even front, and he's still just as effective disrupting and winning one-on-one against his blockers, kind of penetrating gaps too. So Tyleik Williams, to me, I don't know if I don't think he's rated this highly in the consensus yet. For me, he's a top 25, 35 guy. And I do think that he has the talent to go this high if he tests this well and if he finishes the year on a high note. He's been very productive so far. And I think the versatility, the all-around utility for me, I think that can be a big force of multiplication for that defense.
I thought I was high on Tyleik Williams. I have him at 36. So I have not seen him this high, but I don't hate it. He's an awesome player. I think that's an interesting move for sure.
And I will say too, with mock drafts too, I don't always go completely by my rankings. Like, he's not the 16th overall player on my board, but I think mock drafts are a great outlet to kind of bend the rules a little bit, kind of go past your boundaries and your constraints and see what you can make happen. So Tyleik Williams, I do think he needs to clean up a few things before he can get to that top 20 range, but we look at how he moves for his size, how he's going to test. It's definitely going to be in the range of possible outcomes, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to look at my board here because we've got the New York Jets here. I'm trying to see something. I don't know. I'm trying to find where I have J.C. Latham ranked, and for some reason I don't see him on my big board. But I think J.C. Latham is going to be my pick here for the Jets. My biggest concern with him is his motor. He does seem to give up on plays a little bit too early, but that right tackle is a huge anywhere on the offensive line. Just throw a dart, and the Jets need that on their offensive line. I think J.C. Latham, he is my top-rated tackle still on the board. Um, so I'm going to take him here. I like his size. He's a monster. I think he could play really well on that right side, and I'm going to take Latham here. I think he provides some versatility. I think he could play left side, but I think right side as well. You got to be able to protect Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to take J.C. Latham here.
Nice. I like that pick. He was one of my 4 or 5 blue chip prospects entering the season. So he's definitely, the talent is just absurd with him. I mean, we look at how he moves again for his size. You can make that same argument, but he is definitely a freak of nature out there. So I like that pick. Oh man, this is tough, man. I looked at the board and I looked at the team that's up, and I am torn between 2 of my favorite prospects in this class. Malik Neighbors is still on the board, and the Bengals, T. Higgins, contract year. Don't know if they're going to extend him, right? And even then, Tyler Boyd is getting up there too, so you need to re-up at the wide receiver position. Malik Neighbors is super dynamic, but Talise Fuaga is still on the board too. One of my favorite right tackles, who's actually kind of in that early first-round range for me. I'm a big fan of what he has to offer. If I had to choose, God, this is tough, man. Josiah, what would you lean there? I'm phoning a friend here. Malik Neighbors, Talise Fuaga, wide receiver, or a bookend right tackle. What would you lean if you're the Bengals here?
I think I'd go receiver just because I know they drafted Charlie Jones and Andre Ishivitz last year, but Malik Neighbors, I have Rome Odunze higher. I think he would be awesome as well. I don't think T. Higgins is going to come back. They're not going to be able to pay Chase, Burrow, and Higgins. Receiver is going to immediately become their biggest need because you're going to need that third option there. And I think his speed on the outside, you also had that LSU connection there with Burrow, Chase, and now you got another LSU guy in there, which for what that's worth. I personally would go Neighbors. I like Fuaga quite a bit. He has been one of my biggest risers throughout this draft process, but their offensive line hasn't been terrible this year. Also, it's a deep tackle class, so I think I would be fine waiting to get my tackle and take one of the best receivers in the class here. That's what I would do.
You swayed me. I'm going to do it, Malik Neighbors. I just think that he can be a short-range outlet for you, getting rack yards, which can help alleviate pressure, right, for an offensive line. And then at the same time, too, the vertical speed, like you mentioned. Malik Neighbors, one of my favorite wide receiver prospects, top 10 player for me. Let's get him and Joe Burrow connected. Let's do it.
Yeah, I like that pick quite a bit. We got the Falcons here. Desmond Ritter's not the guy, so I think this is a quarterback without question. And it just depends on who you like. Bo Nix is jumping up my board. I like what Bo Nix has to offer, but I also really like Michael Penix Jr. I think Bo Nix kind of fits this offense a little bit better because of his athleticism, his ability to run the football. He's great with his legs. A lot of plays underneath. Doesn't have the deepest arm in the world, and the Falcons don't love to sling the ball down the field like Penix does. So just based on fit, I have Penix higher than I have Bo Nix, but I'm going to take Bo Nix here for the Atlanta Falcons. I think he fits their offense really well, and he's an instant upgrade over Desmond Ridder.
Nice. Yeah, I like it. I think Bo Nix, going back to his Auburn days, man, he was a punching bag sometimes in the college football stage, right? He always was very volatile, but you could see the talent. You could see the athleticism, the off-platform, off-script ability. That was definitely there. He just needed a place where to kind of build his confidence back up and to kind of build off of his physical talent. He's definitely done that at Oregon. I think the accuracy, the ability to manage the game as well. He's so talented, but simply staying on rhythm and managing the game has been one of his greatest traits at Oregon, I think. And I think that's something that's translatable to the NFL level. So love that. Big fan of that. The Minnesota Vikings over here, I think quarterback could definitely be in play for them as well. Now, I know Kevin O'Connell said some things about Kirk Cousins today. Unfortunately, Cousins tore his Achilles. He was playing, I think, some of the best football of his career, arguably a top 10 guy this year, just really, really doing a good job in that offense. But, contract year, don't know if they're going to pay him, right? Anytime a 35-year-old quarterback tears his Achilles, there's definitely some concern there. And I do think medical advancements have made great strides, and that's why I don't think it's going to be as much of a concern as it was in, say, 2000 or 2005. You do need to start to look at the long term at quarterback, and I think for me personally, it's tough. It's tough because I don't know if maybe they re-sign Kirk for 1 or 2 or 3 more years and go with a young quarterback in round 2 or round 3 and try and get that succession plan, or if they just go right off the bat. But I do look at that offense. and the personnel that they have in place. You're looking at Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, two guys who can carve through defensive coverages, but also win one-on-one 50-50 balls. For me, Michael Penix Jr. fits this offense really well. They already have a really good offensive line in place. They did trade away Ezra Cleveland, that guard who's been pretty good for them, but I think they can re-up that pretty easily. So I'm getting Michael Penix Jr. here. I think getting that long-term quarterback, for me, just the way that he dices up defenses within the pocket navigation ability, the poise, the toughness, and then the field vision, the driving velocity, the accuracy, all of that can really help him maximize his skill set in Minnesota. So I'm going with him.
I love that pick. I think Penix is my QB3 in the class. His accuracy and his ability to hit that deep ball is maybe the best in this entire draft. Yeah. He's incredible. And I think he's going to be really, really good. I think for Minnesota, the way that offense plays, he's a dream fit for that team. We got the Steelers here at 21, I believe. The Steelers are one of the hardest teams to mock for because, again, I think quarterback could be in play. I don't think there's another first-round quarterback, but Kenny Pickett's been not good. I think their offense as a whole has been maybe the worst unit I have seen all year. They play maybe a half a good quarter every week and somehow are above 500. I don't understand it. Their secondary still needs help. You got Kalen King on the board, but I'm going to go with a different guy. I'm going to go with Cooper DeJean here. He's got some ridiculous versatility. They need some more help in that secondary. He can play slot corner. He can play safety. He can return kicks. Cooper DeJean is the defensive version of Cordero Patterson, if that makes any sense to anyone. He can do everything on the defensive side of the ball. I think he's great in Pittsburgh, so I'm going to take Cooper DeJean here.
I can see what you're going for with that. I think that's one of my favorite picks we've made so far because you mentioned the versatility. I mean, he can play boundary corner, slot corner, safety, anything you need, and the Steelers really need anything that you need. So, I think it's a good way to kind of cover all your bases with one player, but then you can also build around that player. He's kind of that wild card on the back end. So big fan of that. I think he's a really good fit and he stays in the black and gold, aesthetically. Yeah. I like that too. So that's a fun pick. The Houston Texans at, I think, number 22, I want to say. This one is going to be pretty easy for me. I'm going to go with Chop Robinson, Penn State. One of my favorite fits. Him and Will Anderson Jr. opposite each other. Two guys who are explosive, tenacious, and then if you want to stunt them around, mix up the alignments. Chop Robinson can play anywhere from 7-tech to shaded over the center, and he can still disrupt. I think he's just one of my favorite players stylistically, and the way that he fits that defensive line, that defensive scheme, could really, really be a game changer.
Yeah, I love Chop Robinson. I was high on him coming into the year, and he's been excellent so far this year. So really like to see growth from him. We got the 49ers here, and this is a very interesting spot because I think secondary is a big need for them. I'm considering Kalen King here because I think he's the top corner left on the board. Outside of Charvarius Ward, they really have nothing going in the secondary. There were a lot of talks that they were trying to get Jalen Johnson. That didn't end up happening. But they also have an offensive line need. You still got Talise Fuaga, which putting him on the right side of Trent Williams would be insane. A team that likes to run the ball too, and he's an incredible run blocker. Yeah. You also have Graham Barton, though. And Graham Barton can play anywhere on your offensive line. Left side, right side, interior. And I think their interior is a pretty big need for them. You could also go receiver. There's so many options here left on the board. Man, I'm struggling with this pick.
You're doing what I do when I do mock drafts. I'll be like, yeah, this looks like a need, but there's also this player who's just a great value. It's so easy to talk yourself into something else, and then you're spending so much time in it. That's the fun part, though. That's the great thing about mock drafts.
I think I'm going to go with my top player left on the board, and that's Kalen King. I think their secondary, it's a deep tackle class. I think the cornerback class, there is a bit of a dip there in the second round. Kalen King is incredible. Yes, he struggled against Marvin Harrison Jr., who he's now going to have to take on twice a year, but I think he has got all the tools. He's a physical corner. I think he's going to be a good player. I think the Niners need some secondary help, so I'm going to go with Kalen King.
Nice. Yeah, the way that, obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. was a tough matchup for him, but you look at King, a disciplined cover man. He's got twitch. I think he's got enough burst and speed to win at the next level.
Yeah.
And then just the ball skills, the route identification, all those things, the physicality to play up beyond his frame. Those things are all there. So I like that pick a lot. I'm going to go corner with the Buffalo Bills too. You could go safety as well. I think Cameron Kinchins would be a very good pick here, but I do think there's enough depth in the safety class where I can, wait a little bit there. I'm going to go with corner. Denzel Burke is my pick for the Buffalo Bills, a player for Ohio State who's really taken his game to another level. Well, really not another level. We've seen it from him before, 2021, when he came on the scene as a true freshman. He was phenomenal. Regressed a little bit in 2022, but he's back at it. 6'1", around 195, 194. But he's really athletic, really explosive, really physical and run support, which, Sean McDermott, if one thing he likes from his corners, play tough and run support, play aggressive. And he definitely does that. But at the same time, too, I think his man technique has improved. I think his pedal technique and zone has really improved. I think he's really smooth in every phase. And then he's a former wide receiver, so he can definitely play the ball, and he's shown that. So Denzel Burke for me, I haven't regraded him postseason, right? I'm really excited to go through that process because I think he's one of those players who we know he's been good, but I think he could surprise with just how highly he's going to be rated because the athletic tools are there. The two-phase coverage ability and utility from a technical standpoint is there, and the playmaking ability is a cherry on top. So Denzel Burke, really like the fit, and I think with Trey White coming back from injury, don't know if you can depend on him. Kaiir Elam, that pick hasn't panned out as much as I liked him as a prospect. It might be time to re-up at the boundary.
Yeah, I like that pick as well. We got the Seattle Seahawks here, which my typical pick would be Leonard Taylor. I think Leonard Taylor, we talked about him before. Leonard Taylor's a top 20 guy for me. He is an incredible pass rusher. But you just traded for Leonard Williams. They're different players. I think you could play Leonard Taylor at that nose tackle spot, but that's out of position. That's what Miami's been doing this year, and it hasn't been as productive. A need that I think is sneaky that no one's talking about for the Seahawks is safety. Jamal Adams seems to always be hurt. He's also getting up there in age. It's a good safety class. I'm going to take a safety here. I'm going to take Cam Kitchens out of Miami. I think they really need to up the safety and just get a long-term solution. There's a team that's been really looking at the secondary the last few years. I think Cam Kitchens is a really good fit for them. So I'm going to go with Cam Kitchens here for Seattle.
Yeah, he's been a really good player this year. Very fun to watch. I think just the all-around utility. I use that word a lot, but I mean, the dude is like 5'11", over 200. He's a great playmaker at the center field of range, and he can come down and support too. So you'd love to see all those things from a player. Dallas Cowboys are on the clock. This is always a tough one for me, man. I mean, corner is what I would go with. I don't know if the value is there. I think we've already picked 4 or 5 corners.
I think we've taken 4.
Yeah, so usually that's what I would go with for the Cowboys, but a lot of the top guys on the board left on the board. I'm not sure I would take this high, so I'm going to pass on corner. Looking at the safety group to see if there's any guys who could kind of play that slot hybrid. Andrew Makuba, I really like him, but I don't know if he has the size that they would look for from that hybrid role. Jaron Curse is the guy that they played in that a lot. He might be a free agent, I think, but I think they'd like bigger guys for that, guys who have the size to match up with tight ends and stuff. So I'm going to pass on that too. For the Cowboys, man, I don't know. I think Dorrance Armstrong is a free agent as well. I'm racking my brain through these. You could go defensive line potentially. That's kind of what I'm leaning towards here, just as that exercise. I think it's a little too early for running back too. I know Tony Pollard hasn't taken that lead back role as well as people would have hoped, but I just don't see the Cowboys as the team to pick a guy in round 1 anymore. I think maybe round 2 or round 3 is where they go, kind of where the value of this class is too. So I don't think they'll force their hand. I'm going to go with the defensive line. That's what I'm going for. You're kind of getting an in-depth look at my thought process here live, in the heat of the moment here. We'll go defensive line. I'll start with edge. I'm going to look at edge first, see if there's any guys that pique my interest here. One guy that I am curious about, that I'm thinking about, is Brandon Dorless. I think his fit with Dallas, I mocked him late in round 1 a couple times earlier in the cycle. He's kind of fallen to day 2, but I do think, especially this past week against Utah, I mean, he was just everywhere, wreaking havoc. And I look at Brandon Dorless, particularly his fit in Dan Quinn's system. Dan Quinn very, very flexible with how he uses his talent on the defensive line. He will use you, at 5 tech or 6 tech or 7 tech if you want. But then he's also very, very, very exhaustive with NASCAR fronts. Using his edge rushers, standing up off the line at 3 tech, right, looping them around. Just very creative with how he gets his pass rushers opportunities. And I look at Brandon Dorlus, a guy who's 6'3", 280 with very good proportional length, explosiveness, violent hands, the torque capacity. He can play from any alignment and win. And I look at that and how productive he's been within that role. I've talked myself into it. I'm going to go with Brandon Dorlus. The value just isn't there at corner. I would go corner otherwise, but the value isn't there. I look at Brandon Dorlus, a guy who's very talented, who's been productive, and I think is a really almost a perfect fit for Dan Quinn's scheme.
Yeah, Dorlus is a guy I studied last week. Definitely really like him. Great pass rusher. He's got some nice upside. Little high for me, but I can see your thought process there, and I don't hate it. Jacksonville's on the clock here. Leonard Taylor. Their interior defensive line, not great. We talked about Leonard Taylor. Leonard Taylor is going to be my pick here. Balky loves these athletic interior guys, and I think Leonard Taylor is one of the best that I have studied in the last couple of years. So I'm going to go with Leonard Taylor here.
Yeah, he's my top. Hang on a sec. I think I missed a pick somewhere. I'm trying to keep up with it on my board here. But I think, where did I miss a pick? Oh, Cameron Kinchins. That's right. Okay. I'm keeping up on the mock drafts database. Yeah, Leonard Taylor, I think, was my top remaining defensive tackle in this mock, and I think a really good fit for the personnel that they have because they got Devon Hamilton, Foley, Fatukasi, guys who can kind of man that 0-tech, 1-tech spot and kind of encumber blocks for you and isolate those one-on-one matchups. And I think Leonard Taylor, for me, one of the things that he's best at is just, invading gaps really early off the snap. I mean, he's one of the quickest winners in this DT class because he is maybe the most explosive DT outside of Jerzon Newton, maybe even up there on that tier. But then also, I think he's got really good proportional length, really lean frame, about as lean as you can be at 305 pounds. I do think the hand usage is very good. I think you can get a little bit better. And I do think the flexibility isn't quite as much as it is with Newton or other defensive tackles, but I do think, that vertical penetration, the explosiveness to get upfield and the power capacity too that comes with that explosiveness, that momentum is really just awe-inspiring. So Leonard Taylor, for me, tailor-made, if you will, to be a disruptor. So I'm excited for that one. Who we got? We got the Baltimore Ravens now. All right. Here we go. Baltimore Ravens. I'm racking my brain again here. You could go wide receiver. You could go another first-round wide receiver to complement Zay Flowers. Off the top of my head, Rome Odunze is still available, correct? And I could see that being a very, very good complement for the Ravens. I think Zay Flowers is kind of that ultimate creator at his size, but Rome Odunze can be that boundary threat. There's a few other positions that would potentially pique my interest. I know Justin Madubuike is going to be a free agent, maybe get another disruptor on the defensive line. Michael Hall Jr. is still on the board, but maybe a little too high for me. I look at the value of the board. Rome Odunze is probably my top-rated player remaining, if not one of the top guys. So I'm going to go with Odunze, get him in that receiving core with Zay Flowers. I think that's a perfect complement. Again, 6'3", 215, really good catch point specialist, but also a slippery rack threat, very smooth separator as well. Another guy who's just very complete as a receiver, and I think can be a really, really good fit for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I love that pick. Odunze is right there with Keon Coleman as my wide receiver too. I think he's incredible. Kind of fell down the board, but great fit in Baltimore. We got the Detroit Lions here. This one's interesting. You could look receiver, but they traded for Donovan Peoples-Jones. You could still take Emeka Egbuka here, who would be a really good complement to Amon St. Brown and Jameson Williams. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go with another interior guy. Their run defense, there was one drive last night in the game. I was like, they need to really be able to stop the run. I think one of the best run stuffers in this class is still on the board. We're going to keep another Michigan guy in Michigan, and we're going to take Chris Jenkins out of Michigan. This guy's got power. He's a really good run stuffer, and I think he fits exactly what this defense wants to do. He's going to be able to stuff the run and, play well off of Aiden Hutchinson. So I'm going to go with Chris Jenkins here.
Nice. I love the upside with that one. On top of the run stuffing ability, I remember last year watching his TCU tape. the explosiveness, the agility, and twitch, and how he's able to use that twitch to load torque on his extensions. I mean, and the power capacity within his frame. The dude is a freak. If you can unlock that ability, you're looking at a game-changing player. And especially with Aleem McNeil coming into his own, I think that defensive line could really be a menacing unit for years to come. So I'm a big fan of that. Miami Dolphins. This is an easy one. Graham Barton is still on the board, right?
Yes.
I believe he is. I'm going to go with Graham Barton. I think you got needs at center and guard potentially. Barton has played tackle at Duke, but I think he projects a little bit better inside at the next level. I think he could play tackle. I think he's got the necessary footwork and the hand usage to do that, the balance. But I do think at guard in particular, his explosiveness, his leg drive, his really powerful, and his tenacious finishing mentality. I think all of those things would be really valuable at this spot. But then he's got the balance, the leveraging, the combative hand usage, the independent hands in particular to survive as a pass protector too. So, I think a guy who can play all 5 spots if you need him to, just put him where you need him the most and he will get it done because he's talented enough. And I think he's got enough operational utility as well. So Graham Barton to Miami, get that offensive line shored up.
I love that pick. Then we've got the Kansas City Chiefs, Emeka Egbuka, and I'm not even going to think twice about it. They need a receiver so badly. Their receiving core it's so bad. Emeka Egbuka is my top receiver on the board. While I'm not the highest on Egbuka, he's a first-round guy for me, and he's great after the catch. I just think he provides a lot to the Chiefs that they don't have in that receiver core. So Emeka Egbuka, top guy on the board. It's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I think, he's kind of fallen under the radar because he's been injured this year, hasn't been able to produce a lot because he hasn't been on the field. But I remember watching his 2022 tape, and I was like, this guy is, definitely not at MHA's level, definitely not at Marvin Harrison Jr.'s level because that's a high bar to clear. But this guy is a top half of round 1 guy potentially. That's what I was thinking in the summer, and I think we've kind of been steered away from that since he's been injured, but I think he's still very, very much a round 1 talent. 6'1", 205, really smooth route running ability, really good zone instincts, spatial awareness, the flexibility as a route runner too, and then really strong run after catch ability, really good hands, ability to make catches in stride to sustain rack. So in that Chiefs offense, man, I love the fit with that. I think that Emeka Egbuka would be a phenomenal value pick, and we've seen time and time again, that's what the Chiefs do. They get value picks in the NFL draft. So I could see that being it too. Who we got now? We got the Eagles, correct?
Yes.
All right. The Philadelphia Eagles. There's a few positions that I'm thinking of here. Again, corner, maybe to get a young guy, but again, I think it's a little too early. I think they can, if they're getting a young guy that got James Bradbury and Darius Slay, I think day 2 is where you can do that. So I'm going to pass on that. I'm thinking really hard here. I think one position that kind of stands out to me, doesn't really stand out, but I just think the value of where it's at. We have yet to see a linebacker taken in this class, I think, in this mock draft. And to me, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. at Clemson has been playing out of his mind this year. Like, I will concede Barrett Carter was higher on my board heading into the year, and I still really like Barrett Carter. But, my thought process on those two was that Barrett Carter was the versatile, modern-age linebacker, right? And Jeremiah Trotter was the more traditional of the two. Like, he could stack and shed blocks, really good in congested areas. But this year, man, Jeremiah Trotter, something has possessed him. He has added everything that I wanted him to add to his game. I mean, the pass rushing element, super explosive downhill, bending around blocks, using active hand usage. He's a really good blitzer now. And then at the same time, too, he can stack and shed. He can flow to plays through congestion. He can kind of swim through blocking schemes. He can make tackles at the point of attack. Very good at using his flexibility to squirm past blocks as well, too. So I think everything that you need a linebacker to do, Jeremiah Trotter can do it. So I know it's more of a luxury pick on the defensive end, but if you're Philadelphia, you've got your defensive line. You've got all the pieces there. I think getting a linebacker who can really put the cap on that offense in the run game, but then also be that versatile chess piece in the passing game, that can be a really good finishing piece for that defense. So first linebacker off the board, number 32 overall. I'm going to go with Jeremiah Trotter Jr. I really like what he's shown this year.
I'm so glad you picked Jeremiah Trotter. He's been my linebacker 1 since last year, and I just feel like he has flown so under the radar for people.
He's so solid, man.
He's incredible, and I don't think he's a first round guy for me anymore. He's fallen down to around that mid second round, but he's going to be a really good player. I think his ability to pass rush and blitz, I think, is something that is going to be very valuable to teams. So I really like that pick for the Eagles. Then we got the start of the second round here with the Arizona Cardinals at 33. There's a couple of ways that I'm thinking you could go here. Edge and tackle. You got Paris Johnson last year. He's been good. Still some good tackles left on the board. Kingsley Suamatea and Talise Fuaga. You could have Fuaga and Paris Johnson on opposite sides. But I think I'm going to go with an edge rusher. I'm going to take Braylon Trice out of Washington. He just had a monster game last week. And he is my top edge rusher on the board. You could pair him with B.J. Ojolari and Dennis Gardeck, who's had actually a really solid season. I think it's important to just continue to build that defensive line. You got Jerzon Newton, and then you add Braylon Trice to go along with it. I'm feeling pretty good about that if I am the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, I know the production wasn't really matching up with his pedigree, earlier in the year, but the pressure was still there. I think the complete profile, 6'4", 260, heavy hands, but I really like the explosiveness, the twitch that he brings too. I think you're looking at all the physical tools for sure, and he's starting to add to it this year. So I like that at the top of round 2. Who I got the Carolina Panthers, right?
Yes.
All right. Top 2 things that I'm looking for the Panthers, either a wide receiver, a premier wide receiver to complement Jonathan Mingo, who I think is more of a complimentary guy.
Yeah.
Or you could go with a top-tier edge rusher. I think those are the 2 things that I'm looking at here. And it's really going to come down to, I think, who's the top-rated guy on my board at those 2 positions. So real quick, we'll look at wide receiver. Troy Franklin is on the board still. Man. That's tough because I know Princely Uman-Milan from Florida is still on the board too at edge, and that was going to be a really compelling pick for me. I think Uman-Milan has all the traits to be a premier edge rusher at the next level, right? 6'4", 250, yeah. The length, the power capacity, the bend is absurd with him. I mean, the way that he's able to keep his strides long, well bending around the apex, I mean, that is just, you don't see that very often. The talent is just out of this world. But I look at Troy Franklin, he's still on the board. And, I don't know if he's a number 1. That's the issue for me. Adonai Mitchell from Texas is also still on the board. I kind of like his fit for Carolina better because I think at the end of the day, what you really need in this offense is someone who can be a go-to threat on the boundary. And I think Adonai Mitchell, you can move him to the slot too if you need him to. He's a very good separator, very nuanced separator. So I'm going to go with Adonai Mitchell from Texas. I think the way that he's played so far this year, the volume isn't always there in that passing offense because they've lacked consistency at times. But he's 6'4", he's around 195, 200, really good wiry play strength, and he's a very good separator. Again, the flexibility, the nuance, the stem awareness, the ability to manipulate defensive backs out of optimal leverage, and then really good hands at the catch point, very physical player, very good blocker on top of all that. So for me, I think he's going to win over football minds, but he's got the talent to back it up too. So I think you could go either 3 of those guys and then a few others as well. But I think Carolina either needs to get wide receiver or edge. They get a really good player here.
Yeah, I like Adonai Mitchell there. I think he's a great fit for Carolina. Question, if you are the Giants here, you're going into the draft, your top 2 needs are receiver, and what would you say their second need is?
Receiver and... Shoot, man. I think receiver, and I would say quarterback, being honest, but I think it's realistic to get your solution there right away. I'm not so sure. So I think maybe offensive line, maybe guard. I think interior line could shore that up for sure. Maybe corner, potentially. Adoree Jackson is not going to be a long-term piece for them, and I know Trey Hawkins the third, probably better as a rotational guy. So corner, guard, those kind of stand out to me there.
I was thinking right tackle because Evan Neal has not been good.
That too,
right tackle. And you've got the best right tackle in the class still on the board here. I'm going to take Talise Fuaga here for the Giants, which I think is incredible value if you're the New York Giants. You get the number 2 receiver, the number 1 right tackle, who's a great run blocker like we talked about earlier. This is a team that wants to run the ball with Saquon Barkley. Now you've got a guy who can get to the second level, land blocks consistently. He's got power, great hands. Fuaga has been a massive riser for me. He has jumped into my top 30. I think this is an incredible value pick for the Giants here.
Yeah, I was a guy who I liked Evan Neal coming out. I thought that he would be able to thrive at right tackle, but you're right. He hasn't produced as much as we thought he would. So it's a balance of, do you want to give him more time, or, do you risk sticking with him too long and sinking, right? So I think, especially in this class, when you have so many good right tackle options on the board, We get to round 2. Talise Fuaga is a top 15 player on my board too, so I'm really big fan of him. I think at that point you look at the value, maybe move Evan Neal into guard, maybe experiment with him there and his raw power. At 6'7", I don't know how the leverage is going to translate, but at this point, you're open to experimentation, and I think you get an upgrade in Fuaga because he's such a good player. So you mentioned it, right tackle. I absolutely agree. I think that could be a viable pick. What do we got now? We got the New England Patriots, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Caleb Williams, man, they lucked into getting Caleb Williams in round 1 here. I'm going to go with wide receiver here. I'm just going to go with Troy Franklin. I think Troy Franklin really gives them a lot of what they look for. I think he's got the versatility. You can use him in motions. It's a rack threat, but at the same time, too, a very nuanced separator. I think he's improving there. I think there's still ways to go to be an absolute technician. But the explosiveness, the flexibility as a route runner, the twitch, and the ability to decelerate on a dime. And then at the catch point, too, really good instincts. The hands can get a little bit better, but I do think overall you're working with a really versatile framework.
Yeah, I think that was a no-brainer pick. You got to go receiver. That receiving core is terrible.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big upgrade there. We got the Commanders. I took Jared Verse earlier. They're back on the clock. Now, this is the pick that they traded or that they got back from the Montez Sweat deal. I think it's got to be offensive line. I don't think I'm going to think twice about that. It's really which tackle do you want to go with? Kingsley Suamataia out of BYU, can play both left side or right side, or Patrick Paul out of Houston, who has been fantastic as a pass blocker. This is a team in Eric Bieniemy's scheme that likes to run the ball more. So I think I am going to go with Kingsley Suamataia. I don't think you can go wrong with either of these picks. I think they're both fantastic tackles. I have Suamataia a little bit higher on my board, but I think it's a great situation for them that they get. Even you could throw Jordan Morgan in there as just good tackles that are on the board. I think it's a really good value pick there for Washington.
Yeah, for sure. Suamataia is higher on my board than Paul. I think you can play left or right, which is a nice bonus, but super explosive, super physical. Another name I'll throw out there, Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma, is a guy who kind of stood out late last year, and this year he's put some good reps on tape. Another guy who was very well leveraged for his size, very good knee bend, very good job at staying square with opponents, but he's athletic enough to match them as well. So I think, particularly for the Commanders on day 2, a lot of really good tackle options for you. So getting more picks in that range could be really, really, really fun to see what they do with it. We got the Green Bay Packers, correct?
Yes.
And they took Joe Alt in round 1. I could go quarterback here, shake things up, but I think, if I go with Joe Alt, I want to just go all in on trying to support Jordan Love, whether it's with offensive weapons or with, a defense that can alleviate pressure for him when he's not on the field. I'm looking at corner, right? They've got Jair Alexander, but Eric Stokes has not been able to stay healthy. They just traded Rasul Douglas away. So you're looking at a need there, I think. I think it's one of those positions that they're going to have to, invest a little bit more in. They did get Carrington Valentine in the 7th round last year. I had him graded as a top 100 player off upside alone. But, getting him in round 7, I don't think that's enough to preclude you from taking a corner in round 2 of this class if you really think there's talent there. So let's go to the board and see what's available here. We got corner. We got Kalen Carson, who's still there. I do like Carson. I know he had a rough game against Keon Coleman. I think that's just Keon Coleman being that dude. I do think Carson can still, improve at finding the ball, getting his head around a little bit quicker. But I do think the explosiveness, the reaction to stimulus, the chippy competitive mentality, right, the physicality, playing up to his opponent, that's all there. Who else is on the board? Terrion Arnold, a little bit too high for him. I think, most of the guys on the board right now at corner, I think it's a little bit too high for all of them here. But I think Kalen Carson is at the top. I'm just going to peruse through, see if there's any other needs here. I know Rashawn Gary, they just extended him. They got Lucas Van Ness. Preston Smith, though, doesn't have a long-term future with the team. He might be moving on soon here. So I'm thinking about, oh, hey, running back. That's another one, right? We're at the top of round 2. I think that's a great area to get a running back. So let's take a look at what's there. Travion Henderson is my RB1 still. I know health is a concern with him, though, and the Packers, with their history of health with running backs, maybe not something they want to kind of deal with more. So going down the board here, Trey Benson could be one. I'm going to go with Trey Benson, honestly. we'll kind of go with a wild card here, but Trey Benson to me, just looking at how he's played this year, 6'1", 227. So one of those volume backs who's got that size, really good vertical speed when he finds a hole. I think he's got good vision between the tackles. But the thing that really sold this pick for me, why I was so comfortable taking him here, is that he's actually really improved as a receiving threat too.
Yeah.
You know, I think route runner out of the backfield, contested catches on wheel routes too by the boundary. He's shown he can do that. So I think you're getting more than your average volume back here. Obviously has the size, the speed, the contact balance. The contact balance is absurd with him, but at the same time too, you're not just getting a one-dimensional guy. He can provide value in the passing phase, and to me, that allows him to throw his hat into the ring for RB1 in this class.
Yeah, I like Trey Benson. He's my RB2. I love Braylon Allen from Wisconsin. He's my number one back. Yeah. But Trey Benson's right there. I think they're both fantastic backs. Then we get the Raiders. This one, this one's tough for me because there's literally, you could go any position here and I wouldn't be opposed to it. Corner, I do think's a need. I have Kamari Lassiter pretty high on my board. I know he's a bit of a project, but I think his upside is there. He's got good size at 6 foot 180, long arms, good in man coverage. I'm going to go with Kamari Lassiter here. I'm going to take one of my guys. This Raiders secondary is not good, and you need Kamari Lassiter or another corner to really help take them over the top. So I'm going to go with Lassiter. It's one of my guys in this class.
Yeah, and I will say about Lassiter, he's really improved his man coverage this year. I think two things that he's improved: his technique has gotten a little more efficient, and the ball skills. I mean, he doesn't get a ton of opportunities in that phase, but when he does, we can track the ball. He's shown he can time his extensions properly. I think he has enough upside. Length of his size is very good, enough explosiveness, speed, fluidity to work with. So, I think just a really well-rounded guy who's trending up, particularly in man, but then in zone too. He's shown that he can get depth, he can keep his eyes on the quarterback and use that to key in to the proper positioning. So I like that pick. I think he's a really good player. New Orleans Saints are on the board here. I'm going to go with safety. Marcus May, I think, is a free agent this year. I'm going to go with Tyler Nubin from Minnesota. Really solid player. I think 6'2", 205. He's played very well this year. To me, he's kind of checked every box. He kind of flies under the radar sometimes, but he's just a solid player. Again, I think he has enough closing speed and physicality to work and support, but a very fluid, instinctive cover man too, who can kind of recognize routes as they're developing and hawk in front of the passes. Playmaker, that gene is there with him. So Tyler Nubin, very well-rounded safety who can play too high, can play in the box a little bit if you need him to. Just a really well-rounded player who can provide some versatility for that unit.
Yeah, I like that pick quite a bit as well. Nubin's a guy that's been a pretty good riser for me as well. We got the Rams here. They took Brock Bowers earlier. Oh, man, this is an interesting one. I want to go – JT Tuimalau is on the board here, and that's an interesting pick to me. My issue, I just don't think he fits the scheme very well that the Rams run, so I don't think he's going to be the move. You could go corner. Kalen Carson, you mentioned, I like to make that pick to the Rams all the time. I think he's an excellent fit for the Rams defense. You could also look offensive line. Patrick Paul still on the board. I think he would be really good tackle for this team that likes to pass the ball quite a bit. I'm going to go with Patrick Paul. You need a tackle. I think it's a pretty big need for you. Patrick Paul is maybe the best pass blocker in this entire class. The dude he doesn't allow any leverage as a pass blocker. Now, I do have concerns as a run blocker, but in a McVay scheme that's a heavy pass scheme, I think this is a right situation for him to go to, and I'm going to take Patrick Paul here to the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, the thing about Paul is that you are investing in the size and the tools. Yeah. The dude is 6'7", 320. He's got 36-inch arms. It's insane. You can't even run around that, let alone combat it, right? So I do want to see him tighten his frame a little bit more. Sometimes he'll expose his frame to power, and that his size balance can be a little bit of an issue. But the tools are absolutely there to work with for sure. So I like that pick a lot. Washington, you just picked Kingsley Suamataia for Washington, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so we got Jared Verse, Suamataia. They traded both Chase Young and Montez Sweat today. So you know what? We need not one, we need two edge rushers, and one of the top remaining players on the board for me is Princely Umanmielen. So I'm going to go with him from Florida, Princely Umanmielen. He's actually over Jared Verse on my board right now. I'm just a big fan of the tools, and the bend, I think, is the biggest thing for me. Jared Verse, still a very, very good player. Don't get me wrong. It's not really as much about Verse as it is about what Umanmielen has done this year. I think he was already a very good run defender coming into the year, very good at playing plays laterally in pursuit. But he's really flashed great promise and development as a pass rusher. I think, the spin moves, he's got great leverage awareness, great efficiency with his footwork, but the bend around the corner for me at 6'4", 250 with his length, he should not be able to corner as tightly as he does and sustain his speed as well as he does. I think that bend can really be a game changer. Very good run defender, which I think helps his utility early on, but really has dynamic pass rushing upside with his full allotment of tools. So Umanmielen, to me, I would have considered him late in round 1. I think for Washington getting that second edge rusher, you get Jared Verse and Princely Umanmielen in the same rookie class, that can be insane. And then you got Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne on the interior. Just right away, this defensive line is not missing a beat. So I really like that pick.
Yeah, that's a solid pick right there. Then we got my Colts. I took Kool-Aid McKinstry earlier. I could double down in secondary. I wouldn't hate that, but I do think receivers a need. Michael Pittman Jr. is a free agent. Alec Pierce has been pretty underwhelming now. I love what Josh Downs has done in the slot, but I think you need another outside guy. And to me, I'm going to go with Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. This guy has incredible size. He honestly reminds me a little bit of A.J. Brown. Just his speed, his hands. He's got incredible, just the ability to find the ball in the air, pull it down. He's been really, really good for South Carolina. Bit of a down last couple of weeks, but I still think he's a top 50 guy. Xavier Legette, I think, fits perfectly. A great complement to what the Colts have in that receiver room. As great after the catch as well. Great speed. I'm going to go with Xavier Legette here. This
is a guy who 6'3", 225. I think he hit 23 miles an hour a few weeks ago. So size, speed, freak, absolutely, out of this world. And Shane Steichen's offense is all about vertical threatening, right? So I think getting that size threat in there with that kind of speed with Josh Downs in the slot, man, I mean, you are playing a game of tug of war with defenses that they cannot win. So I really like that. I really like that fit. Tampa Bay Buccaneers here, they picked an edge rusher in round 1, correct?
Yeah, we took Latu.
Okay, so what I'm thinking, I would go quarterback here. I'm not sold on Baker Mayfield as the long-term option. Jaden Daniels for me, he's played his way into this range. He's been very, very good. But I also know center could be an issue for them. I think they're, who was their starter? I'm blanking on his name, but he suffered Ryan Jensen. That's right. Yeah, he suffered an injury. Could be career-ending, if we're being honest. So, that's a tough position to be in. Cedric Van Pran, the top center in this class, is still on the board. I think, for me personally, at this point, you're not getting a guy who's going to fill in right away for Baker Mayfield. So I'm thinking maybe you can wait until round 3 to get that guy, whoever it is. I'm going to go with the offensive line. I'm going to shore up that interior. Cedric Van Pran, for me, physical run blocker. We know that. Super explosive, getting to the second level. I do think he's improved a little bit in pass protection. There's still some room for refinement there, but the bedrock tools that you're working with, the athleticism, the strength, the natural leverage, those are all there. So it's an investment that I'm comfortable taking because he is such a tone setter with his physicality.
Yeah, I like that pick quite a bit. I'm really high on Zach Frazier out of West Virginia.
Yeah, him too. He's very good.
I think I like him maybe a little bit more than Cedric Van Pran just because of the athleticism, but I don't think he gets picked this high. I do like Cedric Van Pran quite a bit. We got the Chargers here. They took Nate Wiggins earlier, which is a great pick. Another team, like the Chargers are just a tough team to pick for always. I like Xavier Worthy quite a bit, but I just don't think they took Darius Davis last year. I kind of think they're too similar of a player. I know you took Davis on day 3. Worthy also has drop concerns. So there's that. I think I'm going to pass on Xavier Worthy. JT Tuimoloau is on the board, can play on that edge. I think he's going to be my selection here. You need some more help on this defense. I know that you got Joey Bosa, you've got Khalil Mack. They're both getting up there. You're going to need a long-term replacement at the edge in the next couple of years anyways. Tuimoloau has been really, really solid the last few weeks. Coming into the year, he had that one really great game against Penn State. but the rest of it was kind of average. This year, he's really answered the call, played really well. I've been impressed to see that. So I'm going to go with JT Tuimalau here. Really good value as well for the Chargers here at 45.
Nice. And they got Tuli Tuipulotu last year in round 3, who's a really good power rusher. I think getting him and Tuli Molau opposite from each other once Bosa and Mack eventually move on, you're looking at a duo that can really compress the pocket laterally and force QBs to really step up and get uncomfortable, and that can be really valuable. So I like that for sure. We got the Tennessee Titans. They picked Amarius Mims in round one, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
So they got that offensive tackle. Wide receiver and corner are the positions that are sticking with me here. I think corner Christian Fulton and Sean Murphy-Bunting are both free agents after this year. So you could go with a corner. That said, wide receiver, that receiver room looks really thin right now. Will Levis coming off a 4-touchdown outing. So I like the future with him. I like investing the future in him and seeing if he can be the guy. Obviously, just 1 week, a small sample size. Definitely we need to see more. But the poise in the pocket, the toughness, the arm talent is absolutely there. I think you're working with some good things as a young quarterback. But I want to see him supported. And there's a few guys that I'm kind of looking at for this one. I think the guy that really fits the scheme the most, I think, would be Jalen Polk from Washington. Not a guy who gets a ton of run this early, but he's been very productive this year. And I think, the things that stand out for me, 6'2", 205. So he's got really good size, really good frame density, really good play strength, but super explosive too. When he has a runway, he generates separation. And, a lot of times all he needs is that extra step to outreach that defender. And he's got very good body control, hand-eye coordination. I think for a quarterback like Will Levis, who's already proven that he's willing to test those tight windows and those contested opportunities down the field, wide receiver like Jalen Polk, who can stretch the field vertically with his explosiveness and convert with his hand-eye coordination and his strong hands, can be a really, really good fit for him. So I'm going to go with Jalen Polk. I think on top of that, too, the ways that you can scheme him touches as a rack threat, that could add an element to this offense, too. So ideally, you get 1 or 2 more years out of DeAndre Hopkins to help kind of build him up. But Jalen Polk, to me, can be a really good weapon for this offense.
I like that pick quite a bit. Polk, another guy I studied last week, he's going to be a really good player. I think he's in this range around late day 2, early day 3. I like that move.
And another guy real quick that I would consider for the Titans there is Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky. I think another really good fit. But it can be either one. I think rack guys, I love those rack guys who are over 200. They can bounce off tackles. You love to see that.
I like that pick. Houston, it's between 2 moves. Mason Smith is still on the board. I feel like he might go back to school because he had the injury. He hasn't been as productive as I would like to see, but he's a guy who's 300 pounds, can play on the edge, can play on the inside, really solid player. He's been a bit down statistically, but I'm also looking at corner here because I think long-term we got to start looking at corner for the Texans. I don't think Derek Stingley hasn't been incredible for this team. I think corner could be in play. Receiver as well. You got a guy like Tank Dell, so I'm not going to look at Xavier Worthy here. Johnny Wilson could be in play, but I'm not the highest on Johnny Wilson. You could even go on the interior of this offensive line, maybe look guard. Cooper Beebe is my top guard in the class. I think he's a good fit here. A lot of ways you can go here. I think I'm going to look the cornerback direction. I'm going to go with Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest. TJ Tampa was also in consideration because I think his size. He's going to be this year's Juju Brents, a guy that's just going to end up jumping up the boards due to his size. I like both of these guys quite a bit, but I think Kalen Carson a little bit more refined. I'm going to go with him here to Houston.
Yeah, I like that fit a lot. I think Kalen Carson, one of the best things that he can do, I think when I was doing his evaluation, it's probably one of the best man coverage corners in this class, right? I think the way that he can match receivers with his fast footwork, really good recovery athleticism, when he's matching guys to the burst to, match and erase gaps upfield, just the physicality, the ball skills too. So I think, you're looking at a guy who's very proficient in man coverage. And, Derek Stingley, Steven Nelson, the Texans have the personnel to play man coverage. They like to disrupt at the on releases and at the stems and let their pass rush work. And I think Kalen Carson really fits that. So I like that pick. I like that pick and that fit in particular a lot. He's been one of my favorite prospects for a while. The Philadelphia Eagles are on the clock. three positions that I'm looking at here. You got running back with DeAndre Swift being a free agent next year. You've got cornerback with Slay and Bradbury getting older. You need kind of that succession plan. Kalen Carson was my top pick there, though, so I think I'm gonna push that back a little bit. Maybe in a longer mock, I would target that in round 3. A future option at corner, but running back is up there for me. But I'm gonna go with the top rated guy on my board at wide receiver, which is Xavier Worthy. Yeah, I think at this point, the value outweighs the concerns. Obviously, you mentioned it earlier when you were talking about the focus drops. I want to see him cut those down. But again, at the end of the day, you're looking at a 4.3 speed guy, maybe even a touch faster, who can completely destroy tackling and coverage angles. But he's a very good route runner too. I think that gets underrated in his game. He's very good at varying his tempo, sinking his hips, stop start ability, manipulation. That's all there. And then he's got the body control and the focus to get his hands in the right spot. It's just a matter of converting, right? I think if he can do that, more consistently, you're looking at a very good threat. So I think A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, getting that speed guy in the middle of that offense can really be the final piece for them. So at this point, I'm willing to take that risk. Xavier Worthy to the Eagles. Let's give Thanos his next infinity stone. Let's do it.
I was hoping you went there. Worthy, I'm still very high on Xavier Worthy. I think he is kind of fallen down. This receiver class is so good, but I think Xavier Worthy is electric. You mentioned it. He's an awesome route runner. He was my wide receiver 2 coming into the year. He's fallen a bit. I think he's at like my wide receiver 7, 8, something like that. But I think I still have a late first grade on him. This value I think is really good. I'm really high on Xavier Worthy. If the drops can come down, I think he is going to be an awesome weapon in the NFL. We've got the Cincinnati Bengals here. And, I mean, there's a few ways. You could look tight end. Jatavian Sanders on the board. Good value. I don't think I'm going to go there, though. I do think I am going to look at the interior offensive line. We heard that they were potentially looking to trade there. I'm going to take Cooper Beebe. I know a lot of people have kind of given up on Cooper Beebe. I think he is an awesome guard. He pulls to the next level really well. He's got good frame. He can also play tackle. He's got great size on the inside. I think that the Bengals, you probably looked for another spot for Cordell Volson, who hasn't been incredible for them. I think Cooper Beebe is a great pick here.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it. I think the primary appeal with him, beyond just being a good player, is that he can play anywhere on the line, right? Like he's played tackle before, he's played guard. I think he can be a starting guard at the next level for sure. He's athletic enough. I think the angle awareness is very good with him. He's a very smart player who knows how to apply his tools. But just being versatile too. I mean, a round 2 or round 3 for an NFL team, right? You never know what kind of bind you're going to get put in by injuries or regression, right? So having a guy who can play all 5 spots is invaluable insurance for a team. So I like that pick a lot. We got the Green Bay Packers here. They picked Trey Benson in round 2, and in round 1 they picked Joe Alt. So we got tackle, we got running back. We could go quarterback again. I think there's still some good options on the board here, but shoot, man, I might go quarterback. I'm kind of talking myself into it. What we've seen from Jordan Love so far, I think if you have an extra second round pick, getting insurance is never a bad idea there, right? I think that's the biggest thing with quarterback is that, we've seen teams think they have the guy, right? But then they get insurance anyway and ends up working out for them. I think Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts is the best example. Now, I think there was some indication for the Eagles that Wentz was maybe going to regress before that, right? I think there was some suspect there. But hey, they got the insurance plan and it worked out for them because they were able to transition, and they transitioned right into another Super Bowl window. So I think for the Packers, you don't know with 100% certainty that Jordan Love is the guy right now, right? I think obviously the situation hasn't helped him out a ton, but at the same time, he's been inaccurate. The decision-making has been a little iffy sometimes. The talent is obviously there, but it doesn't always work out for guys, even when they have the time to put things together off the field. So I think if you don't know 100%, get that insurance plan with that extra second-round pick. I'm looking at Jaden Daniels from LSU. He has been phenomenal this year, right? I think he's one guy that we're really going to have to look back on and kind of reevaluate how we perceived him, because before the season, he was kind of a day 3 guy, like, hey, a sleeper who can be kind of like a Dorian Thompson-Robinson type, right? Just that early day 3 backup. But I think he's played his way beyond that this year. I think you're genuinely looking at an elite creator, an athlete who's also got good arm talent, who has been decisive in the pocket, disciplined in the pocket, very good decision maker. He's seeing the field incredibly well, very accurate from a situational standpoint. I think he's checking every box that we need him to check to say we can take this guy in day 2, have him be a high upside insurance plan. If Love does work out, best case scenario, Jaden Daniels is one of the best backups in the NFL, right? And if you do need to play him for injury, you might not miss a beat. And, worst case scenario for Love, if he does regress and he's not the guy, Jaden Daniels can come in and he might end up being the one. So I think Jaden Daniels, for me, if you have the extra second round pick, get that insurance plan, I think Jaden Daniels is about as good as you're going to get in this class.
Yeah, I think that's the right move. Quinn Ewers, I think I would take first because I think the upside is really good with him. He still can't hit the deep ball to save his life, and there's injury concerns. So there's talk he might go back to Texas for another year. Shedeur Sanders, I think, as well, but I don't think there's any chance he comes out this year. But I like Jaden Daniels. I've actually got a prospect spotlight on Jaden Daniels coming out this Friday. So if you guys want to see my deeper thoughts on Jaden Daniels, be sure to check that one out. But we got the Vikings on the board here. This is a simple pick for me. I'm going to take TJ Tampa, a guy who's got really good size, 6'2", long arms. He's not as physical as I would like, but he plays a lot of zone there at Iowa State. I think he's going to be able to do a lot of things for your team, and I think Minnesota, who needs some secondary help, this is a really good selection for him. So I'm going to take TJ Tampa.
And one thing that has encouraged me for Tampa is that I think he's improved his run support ability this year.
Yeah.
Last year, some of the reps, kind of missing tackles, kind of whiffing on tackle attempts, kind of, not being as disciplined with his angles. I think he's really improved there this year. I think he's playing more physical, more confident, and that's shown. So I like that a lot. And then the athletic tools are there to bank on. We got the Atlanta Falcons, correct? Yes, sir. Correct. And we picked Bo Nix in round 1. So we got that quarterback. We're good there. I'm looking at the options here. There's a few. I'm racking my brain here with the Falcons, man, because there's multiple ways that you could go here. I think the edge rush could still use a boost. I think, even the interior defensive line could maybe use more rotational. I think, in day 2, the potential picks kind of expands for you, right? The potential range of outcomes that you can do. What's acceptable is more wide ranging. So I'm looking at a few, maybe corner outside, opposite AJ Terrell. Jeff Kuda has had his moments. Don't know if he's a long-term guy, though. You could go with the slot guy like Andrew Makuba. Shoot, man. I'm thinking, but then wide receiver too, because Drake London is very good. But what you have outside of him, not a ton. Bo Nix is there, so you want to give him the proper support. Whenever I pick a young QB in a mock, I lean toward giving him the proper support with that because you give him a weapon that he can grow with, can build chemistry with. So I think that's what I'm going to do here. I think I'm going to give him a weapon. And who's a good complement for Drake London? Off the top of my head, a guy that stands out for this Falcons offense is Malachi Corley. I think a guy who can play the slot, very versatile rack threat. I was also thinking Roman Wilson from Michigan because I really like his route running framework. But I think Corley with his rack ability is probably a better fit for what Arthur Smith wants. If Arthur Smith returns, I think that size and that contact balance and that explosiveness is a better fit. I think Bo Nix is a very good distributor, so he'll be able to get the ball to him early in reps and let him churn out those yards.
Yeah, that was my pick. I like Malachi Corley there quite a bit. I can't let the fall continue. It's got to be Mason Smith. Yes, I don't know 100% if he's going to come out, but I expect him to. This was a guy who had a top 10 grade by a lot of people before his injury. He's versatile. He's got great size, can play in the inside, off the edge. He's athletic. And a Browns team that on the interior, could be exactly what they need. I'm going to take Mason Smith. This is the lowest I think I've seen him go, and I think this is great value for the Browns.
Yeah, he's one of those players who, the production has not, and the consistency has not been there, the way we would have wanted after the injury. But again, the talent is just absurd with him. I mean, you look at any kind of film you can find on him. The leveraging can improve, yeah, but 6'6", 300 pounds. Super explosive, powerful when he's able to align himself properly. And then, there's some reps where he's out at 5 tech and he's still disrupting too. So I think one of those guys who's just very talented, right? One of those guys who can be a chess piece across the defensive line wherever you need him to disrupt. The question is whether he comes out this year. That's the biggest thing, right? Does he come out? Because if he comes out and if he's healthy enough to test, he's going to test very well. And so you're going to be stuck in a bind where we've seen high level film from him. We've also seen film where he wasn't quite as high level performing, right? So you kind of take that balance of what can he be and do we think we can get him to that point, right? That's going to be the biggest question for him. So it's a fun pick, though. I always love, the different outcomes for him. We got the Pittsburgh Steelers now, correct?
Correct.
All right, and we picked Cooper DeJean in round 1. I love that pick, by the way. I got to say that again. I love that Cooper DeJean pick to Pittsburgh. I think that's just a great, hedging for all the versatility that you're going to need back there. But then if you need him to play boundary corner, he can too. So for the Steelers, I think, you got Deontay Johnson, George Pickens. There are a few wide receiver options that I would maybe consider here. Quarterback could be one too. We know Kenny Pickett hasn't played very well at all. But you mentioned it, Shadur Sanders, Quinn Ewers. If I had to guess right now, probably go back to school, right? Yep. Sanders I'm more confident with than Ewers, but Ewers hasn't really completed his profile yet. So I would maybe lean both of them going back. Cameron Ward as well, too. Maybe he could be an option here, but I do think there's room for him to keep improving. So, once you get past Jaden Daniels and Penix and Nix and those veteran guys, there is a little bit of a gap right now, or some uncertainty at least. So I'm going to pass on quarterback. We're going to stick with Kenny Pickett for now. I do think you could go with, hang on a sec, because you could go center as well as Zach Frazier. We mentioned him earlier. Mason Cole has not been great for that team. You could go right tackle. I know they got Chukwuma Okorafor, but you could get an upgrade there. Tyler Guyton is still on the board, who I really like. You could go with another corner, honestly, if you want to sack that position, let Cooper DeJean be that roaming piece, right? You could do that, but they got Joey Porter Jr., so I think we can pass on that. You got some linebackers on the board. I think I'll pass on that too. I'm really narrowing it down to either offensive tackle or center, but I think I'm going to go with, because Kenny Pickett, concussions have been a big issue with him. I think shoring up that interior might be the way to go. I'm going to go with Zach Frazier. Very good player. 6'3", 300, low cut frame, really athletic, very smart player, very intelligent player for his age level experience. So I think you're checking all the boxes there. I think it's him and Cedric Van Paren at the top.
Yeah, he's really athletic too. I love Frazier. We talked about this earlier in the video. I like him more than Van Pran. I think he would be great for Pittsburgh. We got Buffalo here. Who did they take earlier? They took Denzel Burke earlier. Yep. Receiver is kind of where I'm leaning for this team. I think they need that third option in that receiving room. However, I'm looking at the tackles still on the board. It's a deep receiver class. You can get a guy like Jamari Thrash, Torrey Horton in round 3, like guys that I'm really high on. Jamari Thrash is probably a day 3 guy, but I'm really high on him.
He's good.
I think I'm going to go with Jordan Morgan here. I think he can play anywhere. I think this is great value for you, first of all. Can play on the left side, can play on the right side, probably your left tackle of the future. And I think that's a good bet there. You get a tackle here who I think could be a day 1 starter at the back end of the second round. You're feeling really good if you are Buffalo.
Yeah, Jordan Morgan, very talented. A guy who, when you watch his tape, just the movement ability that he has for his size. I mean, I kind of liken it back to when I was watching Matthew Bergeron for the first time at Syracuse, a guy who was, and he ended up kicking inside the guard, but I think the principles were the same. Really fleet-footed mover for his size, really good corrective athleticism, and I think that's what shows up with Jordan Morgan at like 6'6", 320, right? So it's impressive. I think Morgan can stick at tackle, and I think he will, and he's played very well. He's recovered from a torn ACL, so very impressive, very talented player. The 49ers are on the clock, and we picked Kalen King. That's right. Hey, I like that fit, by the way. That flew over my head. I don't know why, but Kalen King to the 49ers, I like that fit a lot. So we got corner. Offensive tackle is the one that stands out to me. If I can get an option, a guy who can play right tackle or potentially transition for Trent Williams down the road, that stands out as what I'm looking for right now. So let's take a look at the tackle board and see what's there. Oh my goodness. Got some options. You got Blake Fisher from Notre Dame, who's played well so far this year. Yeah. Still some issues with leveraging, I think. Balance, kind of lurching beyond his center of gravity that I want to see correct. You got Tyler Guyton as well. Another very good pass protector, right, who has enough athleticism and run blocking. Troy Fautanu is another one that I kind of look at. Now, he might kick inside the guard at the next level, but I think he is too. I do think he's athletic enough to stay tackle. The arm length isn't elite, though. Yeah. And he's got a physical edge that could really translate well on the interior. So I do look at those guys, and there's one guy, shoot, man, I'm not going to pick him, but I do want to shout out Kieran Amagaji from Yale.
I was thinking of taking him here. I'm not
Dude,
gonna lie.
honestly, like,
I just watched him yesterday.
He's good.
My good friend talked about him, and he was like, "You got to check him out." This guy is a monster. Like, he's a mauler in the pass game. He doesn't give up on plays. He's got a high motor. I think him getting picked in this back end of the second round is very realistic for him. And I think he's going to test out well athletically.
Yeah, me too. You know what? Let's do it. Kieran Namagaji to the 49ers. Just to talk more about him, because we're not just putting him in for the sake of an FCS player. Like, this guy is legit. I think I watched him in the summer first, and I was like, because we were looking at some early lists and he was on it, and so it's like, all right, let's see if he's got it. And looking at his tape, for an FCS guy, his talent pops. I mean, he is definitely the most talented player on the field, every field that he walks on out there. 6'5", 320, super explosive to the point where he's overrunning a lot of the second level blocks because he gets there too quickly. It's too easy for him. So super explosive, very powerful finisher. There were some reps that I was watching where he's just torquing through extensions as a pass protector, using his opponent's leverage and momentum against them. I want to see him clean up his technique a little bit more, but I thought his pass protection, his footwork looked much improved this year from last year. So I think you're dealing with an upward trajectory. His season ended early due to a quad injury that he had surgery for. Don't know if he's going to be able to test, but if he does, he will test.
Did he get another quad injury? I thought that was a 2022 injury that he had on his quad.
Yeah, he got injured again this year. So his season ended early, but he had surgery on it, so on his way to a full recovery, hopefully. But the athletic tools are very, very appealing with him, and I think especially for a team like San Francisco with a mentor like Trent Williams, you're looking at some very, very appealing upside that could be realized.
And he's a smart player. He's at Yale, so I mean that's going to account for something. So I'm excited about that. I like that pick quite a bit. We got the Dallas Cowboys here, and I don't know how this player is still on the board, but it's going to be Kalen Bullock for me out of USC. He's right up there with Tyler Nubin as one of my top safeties. He's really good coverage guy, but I think he's also played really well as a run defender. I think the Cowboys can look to improve that safety room. And I think Kalen Bullock is really good value here.
Nice. I like that too. The Giants picked Keon Coleman at 4 and then Talise Fuaga in round 2, correct? So we got wide receiver and tackle. I'm gonna pull up their depth chart here real quick. I know they've had some movement, but I want to try and go defense. I know we talked about quarterback earlier, Daniel Jones. We don't know if he's the guy. They're kind of stuck with him for the time being too. And I think if you're going to turn the page, do it with a round 1 pick, right? Don't do it with a round 2 or round 3. Maybe round 4, but at this point, there's a little bit of a void in the QB class. So I think I'll stick to strengthening the roster, something tangible I know I can do to at least improve his chances in the short term. So I'm looking at the roster here. You got Deonte Banks. You've got a few guys, Dane Belton, Xavier McKinney, but I think McKinney's a free agent after this year, I believe. Yeah. So I'm going to go with Andrew Makuba from Clemson. I think he's a guy who can file into the slot right away. He can play safety if you need him to. He can play 2 high, single high. Actually, a very versatile player. I was very impressed with his 2022 tape. For me, Andrew Makuba, because here's the thing. The production doesn't quite line up with some of the other top safeties in the class, but you watch the tape and how he manages space and coverage and how he moves. Super elastic, free-flowing mover, very fluid, very explosive, rangy. I think all of that is going to translate for him at the next level. So I think really versatile player on the back end. I'm a big fan of him, and I think in particular for this defense, what he's able to do and the different types of looks that he's able to fulfill on the back end could be very useful.
Yeah, I like that pick as well. I'm gonna phone a friend like you did earlier. I'm gonna use it here for the Ravens. I'm between corner and edge for the Ravens. I'm looking at either Josh Newton from TCU. I like Dwight McLaughlin quite a bit out of Arkansas, but I just don't know if he's going to get picked here in the second round. Mm-hmm. Or Chris Braswell out of Alabama, who's been incredible this year. Where would you go with that pick?
This is a tough one. This is a very tough one because I think, they got 2 young edge guys, Adafe Owa and David Ajabo. Neither one is quite panned out to the level we would have hoped. Chris Braswell is another young guy who's still got a ways to refine his game. But I think one thing that he has that neither of them had to the degree is the speed to power. I think that's something that's very prevalent in his tape and something that he can build off of down the, early on in his career. And then I look at the Ravens corner room. Marlon Humphrey is still playing very well. They're getting really good play out of Brandon Stevens. Kyle Hamilton is kind of their big nickel. So I don't know if they have a round 2 need for that right now. So I think if I had to pick between those two guys, I would lean Braswell, just because I think for the Ravens, with the personnel that they have right now at corner, I don't think you need to pick one right here. And I think Chris Braswell, the upside is very, very appealing with him. I think he's still got a ways to go building beyond that power element, but the dude is insanely explosive, super fast as well, and he can leverage that into awesome amounts of power at the point of attack. So I'm going to go with Chris Braswell, let him build off that speed to power, and get a corner in round 3 or round 4, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to go Braswell. You convinced me. Your pick here, you got the Jacksonville Jaguars, who took Leonard Taylor in round 1.
Leonard Taylor, round 1 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay. And I know they just traded for Ezra Cleveland. I would have gone guard here potentially, but I do think Ezra Cleveland, Brandon Sheriff. Sheriff's getting older, but I think they can get 1 or 2 more years out of him at least. So I think I'll pass on guard for now. You could go corner potentially. I'm looking at that. But, because they got Darius Williams, they got Tyson Campbell, but they got Trey Herndon, who's entering a contract a year. So let me look at that corner group here.
I like Max Melton here, actually.
Max Melton could be a good pick. Yeah, he's one of those guys who, really explosive, speedy, long, physical, really good man coverage guy. So I could see that for sure. I gotta make the Chris Braswell pick first on my board, so I'm up to speed here. But I'm making sure I'm not overlooking anyone. I could go. Another guy that I'm potentially thinking about is Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo. He's a ball hawk, obviously 6 foot, 200, physical at the point of attack, good in man coverage, good in zone. But I think especially in zone and off man, right? He's a guy who was on Feldman's Freaks with 4.3 speed, and it shows up the recovery speed on tape to close gaps and make plays on the ball is definitely there with him. So I could go Quinyon Mitchell, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go wide receiver, actually, because Calvin Ridley, don't know if he's a long-term piece for them yet. I think Trevor Lawrence is definitely the guy, right? There's no question about that anymore, right? But I do think wide receiver, they don't have a ton of long-term options there, not as much as you've been accustomed to seeing with this kind of team. So I'm going to go with Roman Wilson, actually, from Michigan. I'm going to go with Roman Wilson. I think, he hasn't had the volume from a reception standpoint this year because Michigan has played from ahead with a lead pretty much every game they've been in. So they haven't had to pass a ton. But I do think, when he has had opportunities, he's a very efficient route runner. He's got near 4.3 speed as well, really explosive, really just a top flight athlete who's also very good at contorting at the catch point, extending for passes. As an athlete and a route runner, he does remind me a little bit of Chris Olave with just how efficient, how fast he is, no wasted movement, no wasted space. And he can use that to carve through coverages and get space. So I'm a big fan of him. I think he's going to be a better NFL player than his production implies. And I think particularly for Trevor Lawrence, could be a very good player early on.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I like that one quite a bit. His speed was really what stood out to me when I was watching him. We got the Dolphins here. This is a no-brainer for me. It's Jatavian Sanders. He's still on the board. I don't even know who their number 1 tight end is, so we're going to take Jatavian Sanders. I think he's clear-cut tight end 2 in this class behind Brock Bowers, and I think this is a good value for him.
Yeah, I think the rack ability in particular, really fun fit in that offense. Anytime you have a rack player in Miami's offense, it's going to be fun. So I like that a lot for the Dolphins. We got the Detroit Lions here. They picked Chris Jenkins in round 1. Round 2, you could go guard potentially because they have a couple guys entering free agency. I'm looking at guard on the offensive side, and the defensive side, I'm looking at corner because Emmanuel Mosley injury, and he's going to be a free agent. Jerry Jacobs will be a free agent too. They got Cam Sutton locked down, but that's really the only one. Josh Newton stands out as a pretty good scheme fit to me because they do like to play a lot of man. They like those guys who, are a little bit undersized but fleet-footed, very good at matching, very good at, carrying down the field, sticking to receivers' hip pockets. Josh Newton stands out to me as a guy who does that for sure. But then I look at the guard position and see what's still there on that side. Donovan Jackson's still on the board. And I know he's a little bit lower rated on this board, but I think for me, the physical profile is just way too appealing. I mean, this is a guy who's around 6'4", 320. He's got 36-inch arms, right? So really good natural leverage, really good proportional length, very explosive athlete. Lateral burst is definitely there. And the power with his punches. I mean, this dude can just, render defensive linemen into submission with that. So still some technical improvement to undergo. But I'm looking at that, and I think I'm going to go with Donovan Jackson. Hang on. No, I'm throwing you for a loop. I'm going to go with a different guard. Troy Fatanu from Washington. That's what I'm going with. Because I think Troy Fatanu, just thinking about the whole equation, he's super athletic like Donovan Jackson, very well leveraged, but I think he's a little bit farther along technically. I think the footwork is a little bit better. The hand usage is very good with him. So I think you look at him, he's going to be a starter right away and can be a very good starter like Jonah Jackson, a day 2 pick who ended up being a Pro Bowler. I think Troy Fatanu could have a similar arc for Detroit.
I like that pick quite a bit. For the Chiefs, I'm taking tackle because you need tackle bad. Either tackle. Tyler Guyton's still on the board. I think that's a no-brainer pick for me. Can play that right tackle spot where Jawan Taylor has not been very good this year. I tried to tell Chiefs fans all offseason, your offensive line is going to be much worse than it was last year. And it has proven to be true. Patrick Mahomes has been under a lot more pressure than he's been accustomed to. And I think Tyler Guyton, you mentioned good pass blocker. This is good value for him here to the Chiefs at 63.
Final pick here, man. It's crazy. We've only picked one running back to this point. So you know what? I'm going to change that. We're going to pick Bucky Irving from Oregon for the Philadelphia Eagles. 5'10", 190 pounds of complete carnage. The dude is just insane. I mean, explosive, really good vision between the tackles, very good at, navigating through congestion, but also for a 190-pound back, he never goes down on first contact. I mean, the contact balance, the physicality, the aggression that he runs with, just absurd, and then a great receiving back too. So I think with DeAndre Swift potentially on the move after this year, Bucky Irving to me is a really good fit for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, Bucky Irving is awesome. I remember watching him this summer. I think I was watching Bo Nix. I'm like, who is the running back on Oregon? Nobody can tackle this guy. He's just breaking tackles left and right, and he's been awesome. So I like that pick quite a bit. But we have done it. It's been an hour and 45 minutes, but we have gone through 2 rounds. I had a blast. This was an incredible time. I will leave his links down to his Twitter down in the comment section below, so you guys can go check him out. He does some great work over there. Is there any final things you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'm just surprised we didn't go longer. I was thinking maybe 2 hours, man. Anytime it's a mock draft, I mean, there's so many different things to take into account, so many things to talk about for sure. So many different factors to discuss. But enjoyed going through it with you, and I think with any mock draft, it's just an exercise to explore different possibilities, kind of see how much ground we can cover. And I like some of the selections. I think some selections that were kind of off the wall, kind of unexpected, but it just goes to show how many different outcomes there are out there. So you never know what to expect. You never know what's going to happen. All we can do is talk through it and kind of just cover as many bases as possible. So it was very enjoyable. I enjoyed being on here and talking draft with you. And until next time.
Yeah, we'll definitely do this again closer to draft time. Like I said, I'll leave his links. Leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.